Hey, what it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. On today's show, the Bucks got embarrassed in Cleveland. They lost 135 to 95. That's a 40-point loss on national TV. So Frank and I are going to take a look at what went wrong for the Bucks, discuss Jae Crowder's return, and attempt to pinpoint the Bucks' biggest problem on defense. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical File podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Joining me is longtime voice of the pod and founder of BrewHoop.com, Frank Madden. We appreciate you for tuning in, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Frank, Giannis was a late scratch in this game, bruised right shoulder. He's only day-to-day, so that's some good news for the Bucks because there wasn't much good news in tonight's performance. The Bucks looked bad on both sides of the ball. I mean, during the first matchup against the Cavaliers, the Bucks overcame a 15-point deficit to win the game. They started this game off on the wrong side of a 22-2 run, and they were just never able to truly get back into the game. Got it down to 10. But as I mentioned, the final score, they lost by 40 tonight. Big difference from the last game when they were able to actually put together a comeback effort.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason they won the last game was because I was asking, like, what were the Cavs from three-point range again last game? 6 of 43.
Yep.
Historically terrible. The Bucks needed every single one of those bricks in order to win that previous game. And tonight, the Cavs go 12 for 28, which is very good. It's over 40%. But if you do some quick math, if you take away every single one of the three-pointers, they still win this game, which just tells you how thoroughly the Bucks got wrecked. And I mean, I feel like, Camille, we've had to go to they got their butts kicked, and then they didn't throw in the towel. They kept fighting, right? Like that's what we were harping on after the Rockets loss and the Utah loss. But those games actually like stayed competitive into the second half, into the late second half. This game, the Bucks did make some threes in the second half of the first quarter. Bobby Portis did some stuff. It was 30-22 at one point in that basketball game before the Cavs got the last basket of the first quarter. And then everything kind of just, the wheels kind of totally came off once Dame went to the bench to start the second quarter. Not that Dame was shooting the ball well at all either. But yeah, I mean, this was a terrible game. I mean, the Bucks offensive rating tonight, 95. That's worse than any opponent has put up against the Bucks defense this year. The best Bucks defensive number this year in a single game in terms of opponent defensive rating was about 96, 97 by the Hornets in that game. You guys might remember they won in a blowout in Charlotte. So this Bucks performance is literally the offensive performance was the worst performance by any team, the Bucks or opponent, in a Bucks involved game this year. So put the banner up, really something to hang your hat on. Just no shortage of, I mean, Chris Middleton, we love Chris. Camille, this is a Chris Middleton podcast, obviously.
Absolutely.
He was horrendous tonight. 1 for 10, minus 40. Minus 40. He looked completely frustrated. Just nothing going right. And Dame missed his first, 5 shots or something like that. He was trying to lean into defenders to draw fouls. Refs weren't having any of it. And the Bucks defense, again, yes, the Cavs were making threes. They were making step backs. Donovan Mitchell was dicing and carving them up. The pick and roll defense, again, Malik Beasley and Dame, always 2 steps slow going over screens. Just kind of a typical, like, Bucks, kind of what can go wrong for the Bucks type of performance. But, we're used to seeing the Bucks defense be terrible, but we're less used to the Bucks offense looking terrible. And without Giannis, obviously this team is completely dependent on the perimeter jump shooting, and they didn't have it tonight. Again, you could do worse than what they did in terms of 3-point shooting, where they 12 for 42, so just under
Mhm.
30%. Uh, but just a miserable performance, and yes, some brief flickers of life there in the second half of the first quarter, but for the most part, they threw in the towel pretty soon, and uh, embarrassed themselves on national television. Which, yes, the Bucks are missing Giannis, but I mean the Cavs are playing without Darius Garland, who's an All-Star, and Evan Mobley, who is not
Yep.
an All-Star but is a very very good player. So Bucks we're missing no one else, and Bucks have been extremely healthy this year. So yeah, I mean, it just sort of underscores obviously the concerns that we've had about this team, and just kind of, in previous years they would often win when they were missing one, Giannis or one of their better players, and I would call it like an infrastructure win because they sort of had just the bones of a good team. They had a good system. You kind of count on guys to know how to compete and execute on a nightly basis. This year, if Dame's not playing, if Giannis isn't playing, kind of all bets are off.
Yeah, all bets are off, and it's a thing too where tonight in particular, there's no Giannis. So you understand that going into the game, and you expect for it to be a higher usage Dame game. You're expecting it to kind of have the format similar to when they were out Giannis in Toronto, where it was a Dame game. Like he just kind of the ball was in his hands, he facilitated, he did his thing. It's very hard to win without Giannis, and on top of that, you have a bad game from Chris, you have a bad game from Dame. And like you mentioned, very pro 22 on this podcast. Love Chris Middleton. I'm a big Chris Middleton fan. Matter of fact, when I play 2K, I 2K player plays like Chris Middleton. Okay. So I love Chris's game, but tonight he just didn't have it. He finished the game 1 of 10 from the field, like you mentioned. He didn't get that first field goal until the third quarter. And right after that, he was shortly there and pulled. And that was the end of his night. And normally, if Chris is having a bad shooting game, he's still able to affect the game positively in other ways for the team. But even tonight, he wasn't able to do that. I mean, against Boston, he didn't have a good scoring game. He was only, I think, 2 of 9 from the field in that game, but he was able to contribute with defense. He was able to contribute it with his playmaking. Against Boston, he had 7 assists, no turnovers. And we didn't get that tonight from Chris. And like you mentioned, a minus 40 on the night, more turnovers than assists for him. And Dame, 7 to 20 from the field, 17 points. It's hard to win when your two best players, when you don't have your MVP, Giannis, when he's not playing and your other two stars aren't shooting well. It's very, very hard to win offensively like that. We haven't even touched the defense yet, which we will dive into a little bit later. But one thing that stood out to me with the Bucks offense just in general in that first half, well, I shouldn't say first half, this game that they were playing in tonight, is that it seemed like a lot of ISO ball, a lot of foul baiting, and the refs weren't calling many fouls. And at some point, I feel like you have to figure out how the game is being called and then adjust from there.
Yeah, Bucks took 10 free throws all night. Dame took 3 free throws, and you can tell probably 4 or 5 of his shots were those little driving runners where he kind of leads into guys, and he often gets that call. And I, to be honest, I think that play in general is like an annoying foul call. Like, it's amazing how often referees reward offensive players for kind of just going at speed and throwing the ball up.
Mhm.
Um, and again, like, as a Bucks fan, you love it when Dame is the one getting those calls. But as you said, like, read the room. Like, how many times do you need to do that and not get a whistle before you kind of say, like, all right, I got to do something different? But didn't happen. And not just Dame or Chris. I mean, Malik Beasley goes 1 for 6,
Yeah.
9 for 36. Chris, Dame, Beasley. I mean, you can't. This offense can't score points if Giannis isn't playing, and those 3 guys don't make any shots. You can. I mean, a number of other guys did shoot over 50%. Bobby had a solid night in terms of scoring efficiency. We'll talk about Jae in a minute. A lot of that came in garbage time from Jae.
Yeah.
Campaign hit shots. Campaign, but it doesn't matter, if you get some bench contributions when the core guys who are using up most of your possessions are struggling so much. And give the Cavs defense credit. They didn't give up anything easy, and we saw how imbalanced the Bucks offense is. Well, they don't have Giannis, obviously.
Mhm.
He's the engine that creates all those pain points typically. And, without that, they just obviously were just completely toothless tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you did give Cleveland's defense some love there, because I looked before the game and I checked after the game as well, which I believe now includes this Bucks game. But heading into the game, the Cavaliers had the best defensive rating in the league over the last 2 weeks. And I was like, well, who have they played? Because I know they've been on the win streak. It's up to 6 now after beating the Bucks. And I was like, okay, they beat the Wizards twice. They beat the Spurs. They beat the Nets. They beat the Bulls. So I was like, okay, hey, maybe the defensive numbers are looking so good for Cleveland because of who they've been playing. And then they came out here tonight and they shut me up really quick watching how this Bucks offense looked against them. But there, like you mentioned, there's not too many positive things to really take from the offense, from the defense in this game. But if I had to point to one bright spot in the game, it's the fact that Jae Crowder returned from injury tonight. And some way, like, garbage time actually ended up, I think, being somewhat of a positive for him. And we can dive a little bit deeper into that coming up next. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. And honestly, it's no wonder why that is. Like, it's legit the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because it's just you against the numbers. You don't have to worry about battling thousands of other players, which normally includes those pros and the sharks who do this professionally. With Prize Picks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 different player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. Like, hey, y'all know me at this point now. I like my money when I win it, and I want it quickly. I can be patient about a lot of things. I've been patient with this Bucks defense, but I'm not patient about my money. And that's why I love Prize Picks as well, because you get really quick withdrawals. You get quick withdrawals plus easy gameplay, plus an enormous selection of players and stat types, which all adds up to make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So head over to prizepicks.com/lockedonbucks. /LockedOnNBA, and use the code LockedOnNBA for the first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What is the one move that I can make that'll take my business to the next level in the new year? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. Like, LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or resources to hire. So thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, it's quick, and it's easy. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks, especially after tough losses like this. Special shout out to the everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday. And if you enjoy what we do here at Locked On Bucks, I got to put you up on something else that you might enjoy, because Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you with 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day. It's brought to you by all the local experts of Locked On. Plus, you get our national shows that cover every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Looking on the bright side here, as bright as we can in a game where you lose by 40 points. As mentioned, Jae Crowder did return from injury tonight. It's his first game back since he injured himself on November 11th against Orlando Magic. And Jay had about 7 minutes in the first half. He was able to finish the game with 19 minutes, in large part because the game was out of hand in the fourth, and he was able to spend the fourth quarter just getting in some game reps coming back from injury. He was able to put up as many shots as he wanted to, which served him well, I think, because he started the game off pretty cold from the field, and he was able to at least knock down a few shots there at the end of the game, get into a rhythm. So in my book, That's a positive, getting him back, getting him some reps, and getting him some more in-game experience.
The Bucks won the fourth quarter, Camille, 28-27. Woo!
There we go. Another victory.
Probably the weirdest stat from this game. We often say that single game plus minus can lie. George Niang, 13 of 14 from the field tonight, 33 points. He's probably still out shooting and hitting floaters on the court right now while everybody else has left. George Niang, 33 points in 27 minutes, career high, 33 points. Had a plus minus of 0. The Cavs starters all had plus minuses between plus 33 and plus 40, and George Niang somehow had a plus 33 of 0. And I will blame Jae Crowder, because Jae Crowder, as you referenced, 4 out of 10 from 3, 15 points on 5 of 13. Only a -3, Camille.
Yeah.
In this game, that's heroic work from Jae Crowder. Don't blame Jae Crowder for the bludgeoning that the Bucks suffered in this game. Yeah, and look, I was kind of paying more attention to him offensively. Honestly, defensively, burn the videotape. I don't know what to make of any of this. So let's see what Jay does kind of over these next few games. I'm gonna try to focus a little bit more on what he's doing defensively, but I'm gonna go ahead and say nobody was defending well for the Bucks tonight, particularly. But yeah, I mean, as you kind of guys called out the other day, I mean, he was shooting really well from 3 early in the year. Again, how realistic is it that he's going to shoot, whatever is close to 50% for the
50,
field?
yeah.
Probably not. But, if he's in the high 30s, maybe touching 40% from 3 overall, obviously that's a huge swing relative to if he's shooting low 30s or something like that, which for a guy like him who is pretty reliant on his 3-point shot in terms of how he contributes offensively. And he's a guy that has had some wild swings in playoff series. Some series he shot really well. Some series he shot really poorly. That's a bellwether for, honestly, like Jay's value and what he brings is he hitting 3-point shots. Now, he can do a little bit of other stuff offensively, but his primary value is going to be as a spot up guy in the corners or on the wings or whatever it might be. So you never know, coming back from kind of the type of muscle injury that he's coming back from, how quick he's going to be able to adapt and kind of get his legs back. A lot of times we've seen it, like Chris, for instance. Chris has had his 3-point shot has kind of been the last thing that's typically come back when he's had these injuries to his knees. So especially for a guy like Jay, who's not scoring in many other ways, obviously the hope is that what we saw tonight is reflective of the fact that he's not going to need a whole lot of ramp up, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of rediscover that shooting form that he had in the first couple weeks of the season. So, yeah, I mean, what do you make of a game like this? Probably not a whole lot, but honestly, it's like the problems we saw tonight defensively. I mean, we've been seeing them all season, right? And I think kind of we're at the point now where, I don't think any of us are saying like, oh, just give them a little more time to gel, like they'll figure it out, right? I'm just going to assume they're not going to figure anything out. And if they do, fantastic. But I'm not expecting Jay's going to rescue them, save them. Again, as we've talked about, maybe Jay gives them a bit of a, different pitch that they can use in terms of going small more often with Jay at the 4, Giannis at the 5. But let's wait till Giannis actually plays a basketball game before that happens. And let me ask you, Camille, I find it very annoying. I'm not like a Prize Picks, like big, like, a fantasy
Parlays.
better parlays, all that stuff, individual player bets and things like that. But if you are, I imagine it's got to be pretty annoying, or, you're betting on this game or whatever. Pretty annoying. Giannis, we know he had a shoulder injury because he was like questionable for the previous game on Sunday and Sunday with this injury. He plays, then he isn't on the injury report for, whatever, leading up to this game. And then all of a sudden, the afternoon of the game, all of a sudden he goes from not being on the injury report to being out with the shoulder contusion. Like, again, I'm not a gambler really, but given kind of the direction the league is going, like, I mean, that just doesn't seem like the way that injury reports are supposed to be done by the team. Like, if I'm the NBA, I'm not really pleased with the Bucks that all of a sudden Giannis goes from fine to being out, right? And of course, as a fan, yeah, of course, I always want to see Giannis play. But I also understand, look, they had a couple of off days before this. They get a couple off days here leading up to the next game. So they are able to stack some rest for him. And we'll see. I mean, maybe he's going to miss one of these Pistons games as well. Do I trust the Bucks to beat the Pistons without Giannis after tonight? Maybe not. But we'll see. Probably whether he rests in one of those games will be a good indicator of exactly how banged up that shoulder is. But certainly didn't necessarily look like the normal Giannis over the weekend in terms of kind of overall dominance. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, good to get Jae Crowder back when Giannis is out, but let's just say it didn't feel like a very good trade on a night like this.
No, absolutely. And as a prize picks player, as I've mentioned before, what they'll do in a situation like this is they'll actually reboot the entry. So it'll
Yeah.
act like he didn't, like it's not counting against whatever
Yep.
you bet. So if you did a 5 pick, it'll just revert it to a 4 pick and you go from there. But everyone doesn't do that.
Hey, look, we turned this into a Prize Picks ad read, like a backdoor
Exactly.
Prize
Prize
Picks ad
pick.
read.
Doing my job. I'm doing my job. But one thing to your point about Jay's return and how it comes without Giannis and how that affects things. So you have Andre Jackson Jr. starting for Giannis in his place, and you're not going to get that offensive firepower there. So again, you were hoping it came from Chris and from Dame, but it didn't. But one thing it made me think about with this game is the bench scoring, right? Having Jay back gives you another 10, maybe 15 points for your bench, you hope. And bench scoring has been an area for the Bucks that has been very up and down. It's been pretty much just dependent upon what Bobby Portis can do, along with Pat Connaughton. So having another guy who you can count on to knock down some open shots should be a boost for them in some minutes when, they have to put them starters on the bench since they can't play a full game. And as you mentioned with the defense, like a lot of the issues that we saw here tonight with the Bucks defense are things that we have been talking about this entire season so far. There are many different things you can point to when you look at what's wrong with the Bucks defense. And I would like to attempt to figure out what is the biggest problem with the Bucks defense. Now, that's a tall order because again, there are quite a few things working against the Bucks defense right now, but when we come back, let's try to pinpoint the biggest thing for that defense and what's that problem. Sometimes I have a bad habit of waiting until the last minute to make a decision. That bites me in the butt in many different ways, but one way that it doesn't is when I'm thinking about buying a ticket to a game or an event that I have interest in. Because with Game Time, I can wait until the last minute to make a decision if I want to go or not. Because Game Time has killer last minute deals. You see all in prices. You can see the views from your seat. Plus, they guarantee the best price. So Game Time just takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. One of my favorite Game Time features is the ability to see the views from the seat. So, like, if I'm going to a venue I've never been before, being able to see what the view will look like from where I'm sitting at is so clutch. I love looking at that before I purchase tickets. It's just really clutch to be able to see that view before you buy your seat. So you know exactly what to expect when you arrive there. Game Time is truly the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Bucks defense, Bucks defense, Bucks defense. All right. Tonight was the Bucks' 41st game. We're officially halfway through the season now, and the Bucks sit at a 28-13 record. Mentioned it ahead of this previous break. There are a lot of different things you can point to when you're trying to figure out what is wrong with the Bucks defense. But at this point, halfway through the season, Frank, what do you think is the biggest issue defensively for this team?
Well, I mean, obviously we made a big deal early in the season when they went back to dropping Brooke Lopez for the most part, right? So I mean, I think Brooke is mostly playing in the relative place that he should be. I think the biggest just sort of thing that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense and which ties into what we're seeing in the data as well and where that they're really having issues is one of the main sort of tenets of Adrian Griffin's defense was they wanted to pressure the ball. We see them do this where guards try to get up in the opponent 30, 40 feet from the basket sometimes. We see obviously Bobby Portis, hedging really hard and having to recover. So they do try to do a lot of things out on the perimeter to apply pressure. And what has it gotten them? They are dead last in terms of turnover rate.
Yep.
The whole point, I think, of doing this was that they wanted to force more turnovers. And the irony of this is that it was like Adrian Griffin was treating this team like the Raptors that he coached before this, who could not score in the half court, who could not really score easily, period. So they needed to force turnovers to get easy baskets. And so it just felt like, well, this is what we've been doing at my other team, and I don't really know what else to do. So I'm just going to try to copy paste that onto this team with entirely different personnel. And obviously, again, we've said it a million times, very late in the summer, right ahead of training camp, you get a massive move and shake up to the roster with Dame coming in for Drew Holiday. Campaign then comes in right after that as well. So like you're doubling down on sort of these small guards that don't play a whole lot of defense versus last year having Drew Holiday and Javon Carter. But that said, like the Bucks, I've had a few people like kind of speculate, well, did they hire Griff like wanting to play sort of defense because like they thought Brook Lopez might leave? And to that, my response is like, first off, when they hired Griffin, it was early June. They still thought they were fully expecting Brook Lopez to resign. It really only was kind of late in June that things got a bit scary that he might leave for Houston. More importantly, if you can coach defense at all, you should know how to coach a very good rim protecting drop defender, right? Like this is not rocket science. And so, basically as soon as you show up and you do something different, you're kind of like, misspelling your name on the test kind of thing. Like that's the easy part, right? So they've got, they were able to kind of revert back to some of the stuff they were doing previously. But again, I just think they need to figure out how to be even more conservative because what they're doing to me just sets up driving lanes, blow by lanes, and puts Brook Lopez and Giannis and Bobby Portis, more in the crosshairs. And again, you're just making life difficult on your big men who are the strength of your defense. So I mean, you're going to rely on them, I think, a lot to be even average defensively with this personnel, especially with the guard personnel that they have. But it just seems kind of self-defeating, right? Like, what are you really hoping to get out of this? And if you're not creating any turnovers by playing this way,
right,
then what are you getting out of it, right? We haven't seen any trajectory of improvement really with this team defensively, and so they're just kind of a team without an identity, right? What do they do well?
Yep.
Like what are they trying to do well, and what do they actually do well? I mean, the irony is like one of the things that they do well is they limit opponent 3-point shots, which we didn't think was going to happen. Like we were like, oh well, Griffin's going to want to be more aggressive, so they're probably going to help more, and they're going to be chasing the ball, and they're hopefully they'll be good at other stuff because they're going to give up a lot of threes. Well, they don't give up many threes at all because teams just can get to the paint and get layups on them. So it's like the things that they're good at are like kind of accidents of the things that they're bad at, basically. And that's how you end up with a bottom 10 defense, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there any big shakeup that's still going to happen? I mean, we're halfway through the season, so clock is ticking. It's never too late, but
couple weeks away
yeah.
from the trade deadline. We're going to see. And I think your point is a really good one because for me, I still go back to that point of attack defense because that's such a crucial part of the defense. Like we're seeing the numbers that they're giving up in the paint. And I believe tonight they gave up like 74 points in the paint to the Cavaliers, which is terrible. Like that's terrible. And on the season, they're 25th in the league with giving up opponent points in the paint, which is a far drop. Last season, they were 13th points in the paint, opponent points in the paint. And that last year was like, hey, they're slipping a bit because the year before that, they were 4th in the league. Like they just didn't give up points in the paint. So you're seeing this team leak points in the paint. And a large part of that comes from the lack of perimeter defense. Like the point of attack defense is just so bad. Guys are just having a straight line to the basket and Brook's defending too. Like it's putting him in a bad spot. Like we know Brook is good at playing defense. Like he's an all defensive type of center. And yet and still, it's not good enough because he is just being under attack consistently with this team. And it just leads to a host of so many problems because even when Brook is averting his attention to try to stop whoever penetrated, At that point, it's someone else who's going to, like, if the shot does miss, let's say he does play defense and they do miss the shot. Now he's out of position and he can't even box out to try to help his team secure the rebound to end the possession. So then second chance points happens, and then you're just in this terrible, terrible string of like, it's just one of those things where you just look and you see everybody just kind of go like, oh, like it's just like a deflating moment when you're just seeing the teams constantly do the same things over and over and over. And that's a problem. And I'm looking at the team and I'm like, personnel, like we just mentioned, we're about 3 weeks away from the trade deadline now at this point. Like, is there a move they can make to try to solidify that, get somebody in here who can be stronger at point of attack? We're going to have to see, but it's got the Bucks defense looking very uncharacteristic with how much they're giving up in the paint, which, to your point about what Griff is looking to do, you would think that would be an area that he would prioritize as well, but it hasn't looked that way so far.
Yeah, and like we talked about, I think a week or two ago, they really haven't tried that much stuff either. Like they've been, he's been far less willing to play Giannis at center than Bud ever was, and certainly a lot of that, some of that certainly ties to Jae being out, but again, you can find other ways to go small, right? Especially with Andre, we saw them experimenting a little bit with that. So yeah, it's just it's been just a strange first half of the season, and again, like somehow, some way, you're still second in the East, so that's good. But I think what we saw tonight is a bit of a warning shot, from the Cavs. You get them twice at home after this 2 games against the Pistons, and assuming you can take care of the Pistons in those games, if the Cavs keep winning, they're now 2 games behind you in the loss column, right? So
Yep.
God forbid they beat you twice at home, then you're even in the loss column, and you've got other teams chasing you in terms of the East standing. So I think, because the Bucks have just been in second for essentially the entirety of the season almost, I think it's built up sort of this degree of, complacency isn't the right word, because I don't think the players necessarily look at that and base, like how much they're trying based on where they are in the standings. But I think in terms of how we perceive them, as Bucks fans, we've gotten a little bit comfortable. It's like, we're still second, people saying that things are so bad. We're in second, like we're closer to second than we are, fourth, or closer to first than we are fourth, or however you want to think about it, right? But now you're even with Philly in the loss column. Cleveland is at 24 and 15, and then you've got the Knicks, Heat, and Pacers all with 17 losses. So, what if Dame is out for 2 weeks with, some random injury, right?
Knock on wood.
What if, God forbid, Giannis misses a week or
Yeah.
two with whatever, right? We just sort of assume that won't happen. He's been remarkably healthy, but you've had remarkable health luck all season to get to where you are. And so if things kind of swing against you again, I think it's fair to question just how resilient is this team going to be, because resilience is not a word I would associate with this team after watching tonight's effort. They kind of just, folded like, I don't know, fold like some kind of folding chair, Camille. It's too late for me to have good analogies, but they just kind of crumpled and looked like they were ready to go home early in the second quarter.
Yeah. It was after the second quarter, it felt like that game was already over, to be honest. But hey, like you mentioned, they do get Cleveland after this upcoming 2-game series against Detroit. So up next for the Bucks, a Saturday afternoon showdown against the Pistons in Detroit. It'll be the first game of a Detroit doubleheader before the Bucks come back home and face the Cavaliers in 2 consecutive games. Appreciate that Bucks game being early, 2 p.m. start, I believe, on Saturday, which, if you're a Wisconsin sports fan and you might be interested in a football team that hails from Green Bay, should be able to finish up the Bucks game and then head right on into that Packers game. So it should be a fun weekend, hopefully, for Wisconsin sports. And I would love to have those who are watching on YouTube drop in the comments and let us know what you actually think that the Bucks' biggest defensive problem is, because I'm curious just to know what people are thinking after having a half of a season of this team to watch. So, Frank, I think it's time for us to get up out of here. I think we've talked enough about the slaughter in Cleveland this evening. So to everybody listening, make sure that you head over to Locked On Sports today on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's going to be a lot of good content over there. So make sure you check that out after we close here. For Frank and myself, we're going to catch you later.